Very interesting. David, your reaction?
Yes, Shaka and colleagues, the money, the economic impact of this money is that you commented on is one thing. Like, $50 billion leaving the continent annually. That is in the same range as foreign direct investment coming in. So canceling one another. No, this much we know. But I think what we need to pay more attention to is the political angle. How is it that in these countries that have been highlighted in the Panama Papers, say for example Angola, DRC, and Rwanda, touching on top leadership, but because of fear, there is absolutely no discussion. So what we're dealing with here is that not only are these countries hemorrhaging economically, but politically, you have actually societies that are quite literally in prison. I repeat that. You have actually countries in prison. If you have a country, say in DRC, where the sister of the president is named, but when a newspaper mentions her name, they're threatened that they'll actually be thrown in jail. Then in Rwanda, like I said, where no one would even dare mention, later on discuss. Then you have a situation in Angola where you have like oil minister implicated. Obviously, a minister belongs to a cabinet headed by the president. So I think we are actually in dark ages politically where really we are not in the same league whereby you have, leadership held accountable. Societies cannot even talk about this issue. This is tragic. In fact, it's a political tragedy.
Very interesting. Mariama, do you have any more audience reaction?
Absolutely. We'll go to another comment from Patricia Namdi. Speaking of Uganda, she's writing to us from Uganda. She says that when the wealthy fails to pay their taxes, the common man suffers. People with smaller businesses are forced to pay higher taxes, which is absolutely isn't fair. The international community, she says, needs to find a solution to this problem. I think we can look at one more comment, this time from Martin Wugol, who writes, I know that whoever tries to avoid paying taxes is an unpatriotic citizen. That's quite an interesting take that I haven't thought about before, but Shaka and guest, you're taking that.
What about you, Tabu? Can you react to that, please?
So absolutely, the comments on social media raise the fundamental question, because when the most gifted, the wealthy, don't pay tax, one of the things that happens, obviously, poor, struggling economies like this one of Uganda, therefore lack the resources to invest in public works. That will be one of the impacts. And in Uganda's case, each GDP to tax ratio has been hovering at about 13%, which is the lowest in the African community. The second aspect is that those who actually pay their taxes are taxed more in order to pad the gaps left by the wealthy who are not paying. Of course, from the business perspective, every entity would like to pay as little tax or incur as little cost as possible in order to increase the bottom line or the profit margins. And so it is, if you like, in their interest to look for where they can pay the lowest tax rate. Frankly, of course, we know some of the tax havens such as Luxembourg or Switzerland that you referred to are in the West. And I think that countries where these monies actually end should take keen interest and actively engage with the government of the countries where these monies are coming from so that they are returned. And if that does not happen, as long as they provide a safe haven, there will be a motivation at the local level in countries like in many African countries where the institutions are weak, where the wealthy are not sure of the political security, and where in some cases the ruling class is also uncertain about the security of themselves and of their investments in their own country. The temptation obviously will be for them to have this money elsewhere other than in their own country. So there's a governance aspect which then flags the insecurity for individuals who are in many countries to invest their money abroad. But there's also a question of weak institutions where they are not able to rein in on people or investors who choose to expropriate resources of these countries for investments in tax havens or elsewhere.
You know, Tabu, when the papers, the Panama papers were leaked, there was a profound reaction, throughout the world, especially in Europe. You cited an example, for example, in Iceland, where in fact the Prime Minister was forced to resign, correct?
That's correct.
What about Uganda? Do people really take it seriously when you interact with people? Do they know what you are working on? And if they do, what is their reaction? Because we really haven't heard much from that part of the world.
That is true, but also, as I did indicate at the start, that actual reporting on this is still a continuing process. And it is easier for people to take immediate interest if the reporting is not issue-based and is personality-based. Obviously, the temptation is to hold those in power accountable. So if the reporting, as in the case of the story that I did, has not yet identified any of the executives, for instance, or any of the elite in the leadership of the country, people still think that it hasn't touched the right note, if you like. And my sense is that every aspect of people, and it's not, as David raised, I think, earlier, that it's not entirely legal, or criminal, indeed, for people to try to avoid tax or pay the least amount, which is what the tax avoidance is about. But the most important aspect is the burden now that imposes on the country where people are practicing this. And so in terms of impact, yes, I do know that there was a reaction by the Ugandan government indirectly through other ways that I think at the moment I am unable to disclose in response to the story that I published. Obviously, we are going to publish more stories on the Panama papers. And the thing I need to raise is that not all documents will immediately show who the owner of this particular investment is. And it takes time to link the investment to the actual owner because most of it is disguised and different people are registered as trustees. And making the connection to an actual office holder is a highly technical thing, and you need to get it right, because the moment you get it wrong, you can also be in deep trouble.
I understand. Well, Mariama, thank you so much for bringing us this week's audience reaction.
Well, thank you, Shaka, and that will do it for today's segment. Just a reminder that we appreciate all the feedback, whether it's in social media form or using other means to communicate to us. Please keep them coming. And if you are a new fan, just drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com. Or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com. Or you can join our YouTube channel. Just sign up to VOA TV to Africa. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. We are at VOA Shaka. A reminder that the show is streaming live every Wednesday. Just go to the VOA Straight Talk Africa TV program page on our website, or simply watch us on your mobile device. Just download the VOA mobile app. Now let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program. Next week on Straight Talk Africa, we'll discuss the 25th anniversary of Eritrea's independence. Join Shaka, Ssali, his panel of guests, and me as we talk about the East African nation. That's next week, right here on Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back, and today we are talking about the Panama Papers' impact on Africa. Our distinguished guest, Ray Choto, Senior Editor, VOA Zimbabwe Service, Dr. David Himbara, author, consultant, and analyst on the Rwandan government connection with the Panama Papers, and Tabu Butagira, Associate Editor, the Daily Monitor, an independent Ugandan newspaper. Well, gentlemen, I have to say frankly that I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to interact with you on Straight Talk Africa.
Yeah, welcome, Shaka.
You're most welcome. Thank you, David.
Likewise, brother.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me come to you again. Thank you, Tabu. Let me come to you again, Ray. Earlier you said that part of the reason why these governments are not acting decisively is because you said they lack political will. Let's talk about your country, for example, Zimbabwe. People went through many years of liberation struggle. You had a rebel prime minister called Ian Smith, who obviously in the mid-60s declared the unilateral declaration of independence, which was Southern Rhodesia. And people, they armed themselves and they organized, mobilized, and fought for what they said was the freedom and the independence of their country. How can you possibly question those leaders, really? Are you suggesting that these people are not nationalistic at all? Are you suggesting that they lack patriotism?
Well, my understanding of what is going on in my own country is that people fought, yes, for the liberation of their country. They are independent. As much as they are independent now, they are not independent in their own country. You look at people who try to express themselves freely, they get beaten by the police or arrested. People want to just have a peaceful demonstration. The police come to harass them. There is the breakdown of rule of law. There is the disregard of the respect of human rights. So here's a situation where you were talking about, looking at what is happening in Iceland, where people revolted against their prime minister, and there is deafening silence in Africa. People start to think, the moment they're going to the streets, what's the next thing? I'm going to be beaten, I'm going to be killed. Is it worth it to do that? I think that is sort of scaring people. Also, too, I think the level of understanding human rights also needs to be put in proper context so that the citizens are aware about their rights. If we are talking about money being taken out of their country and being stashed somewhere which they will never get it again, what is their responsibility as citizens? Should they just sit down and watch? These are some of the issues that people need to be told. We are talking about politicians, Shaka. We are also talking about international corporations that have been false invoicing the countries, meaning to say that whatever they are exporting, they are not giving a proper figure.
But they are sharing with some elements within the ruling elite.
Which becomes handy for those people. But for the ordinary people, they are seeing these things happening. But whether they don't want to react or they are powerless to react is an issue that we need to look at. But the starting point is that the journalists are simply giving them information. This is what is happening. What they have to do with that is up to them. But the information, they have it. Come tomorrow, whoever will be the president of Zimbabwe, the names will be there. So the journalists have done their part. These are the people who are taking money out of the country. Whether the government is reacting or is not, it is up to the citizens to deal with that matter. We as journalists, we simply did our job to explain what is happening. We understand the difficulties and the challenges people are facing, but our job just ends there. We are here to inform the citizens about their environment. How they deal with that environment is up to them.
Very interesting. David, Ray raises a very interesting question here. He talks about, for example, citizens in Zimbabwe happen perhaps not to be socially or politically aware of their rights. In your view, do you really think that the people of Zimbabwe, or for that matter, across most of Africa, do these people in fact perceive themselves as citizens or subjects? Citizens meaning, obviously, owing allegiance to the state and therefore, in fact, having constitutional rights. You could even say birthrights, for that matter, inalienable rights. Whereas, of course, being a subject, you owe your allegiance to an individual authority, and therefore you have no rights, but you get privileges from that particular individual.
You know, my reaction might sound, might make Ray laugh, because I'm going to say that in Zimbabwe, bad as the situation is, it's heaven compared to our situation in Rwanda. Because in Rwanda, I mean, in Zimbabwe, indeed, the issue was discussed. Panama Papers were discussed. If I'm not mistaken, even authorities promised to investigate. The issues were discussed. But we are talking here countries whereby no one can even dare talk about the issue. Zero. So we are talking here, I'm not even sure that the term subject applies here, really, you know.
Sharecropper, perhaps?
I really would like to hear Ray and our colleague in Uganda say something about Rwanda, because actually, Monitor in Uganda is a paper that carried the Rwandan story. Rwanda is probably sneaked in. They got the news from Monitor and the East African. That is extraordinary. So, Ray, yes, I agree. Papers, the media did its job. The issue was put in the public domain. Zimbabweans took it as far as they could, safely, without being beaten, and then took it. But we are talking here in a situation whereby you don't even dare. We're talking about a totalitarian state that controls almost all aspects of society, whereby even everybody self-censors because of danger.
No, but if you talk about a totalitarian state, it becomes very difficult for some people to understand what you are trying to say or what exactly you mean, because the last time I checked, about 2 weeks ago, the Rwandan capital, Kigali, was the host of the World Economic Forum. Can you have the World Economic Forum meeting in North Korea, for example?
Well, didn't we have Olympics in Hitler's time? What was wrong with that? There was the Olympics, events held by totalitarian regimes. There is no question about that. But here is what I mean by totalitarianism. Precisely the comparison I made with Zimbabwe and Rwanda. On one hand, of course, both are dictatorships led by one man, one dictator. But in one case, you have a situation whereby actually an issue like this can be discussed, but you have another situation whereby no single newspaper would even dare. By the way, where even newspapers don't exist, the only daily there is owned by the government itself. So that's where we have to now distinguish total control versus control that allows people to breathe. That is really self-explanatory in my view.
Very interesting. Now, Tabu, talk to us about some of your experiences so far. The question, of course, would be that what have you particularly learned from these Panama Papers that you probably you would consider to be unusual or remarkably unique?
Shaka, first of all, maybe let me just pick up from the earlier comment, which was made in regard to the need for international cooperation in stemming this vice. And that brings me to the issue, for instance, that when British Prime Minister was caught on the tape saying that Nigeria was fantastically corrupt, there were those who had argued that indeed President Buhari, who was visiting London, should have asked for apology. And he said he will not. In fact, in his side, he said the money which is stolen from...
I'm sorry, I think we probably have lost Tabu's telephone link up, but I think that he basically wanted to say that Nigerian President General Muhammadu Buhari did not in fact want an apology from the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. He actually wanted something, he said, tangible. This is a man, by the way, when he was military head of state back in 1985, you remember, he was able, for example, to hire some Mossad, the former Mossad Israeli intelligence officers who went to Britain and tried to kidnap Umar Diko. Umar Diko, a man who had been a minister under Shagari and had reportedly gotten away with about $5 billion, which were in British banks. Your comment?
That's a complicated one. Actually, I wanted to respond before I get to you back to what David had earlier on talked about what's happening in Zimbabwe, that the authorities are saying that they're investigating. I would want to say to David that we have seen so many commissions being set up to investigate things, but no results have been given to the public after so many years. So yes, the governments might be saying that they are investigating, but are they really investigating? Who are they investigating? And also too, why do we need to even invite people, like what we are hearing from the government, to invite those people who have been found in the Panama Papers to come and explain and have a cup of tea or coffee with the Reserve Bank governor? You know, what are they discussing here? If a crime was committed, why not just let the law take its course? So I see this, that's okay, fine. This thing came out. Yes, they are trying to do some investigations. But these investigations, what are they going to come up with at the end of the day? Are we going to have another committee like what they've done over the years, where they set up committees to investigate with no result? I think that's the sad story that we are always talking about.
Shaka,
and I wish...
Can I respond to Ray just a little bit quickly?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Ray, but please pay attention to my comparison. I'm not saying that it's perfect in Zimbabwe, but I'm saying that you have one situation where this issue was discussed versus a fearful nation where no one would even dare talk. You don't see a distinction there, please?
No. I think what he probably means, I don't know, is not that the issue was not, well, when you talk about discussed, I don't really know to what extent it was discussed. Maybe the issue was acknowledged. Maybe that's what he's trying to say.
Okay, acknowledged, yes. The media reported, yes. But we were talking about total silence, brother.
But so did the Rwandan government statement saying that whatever your friend, Brigadier Emmanuel Ndahiro, did, in their view, was legit. It was in the interest of the state.
No, but the state, on its own, issued that statement. If I ask you to check, even after this discussion, I dare, even the guy from Monitor, I dare someone show me where even one single newspaper reported Panama incident in Rwanda. Zero.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, unfortunately, time happens not to be our best ally. On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Ray Choto, Senior Editor, VOA Zimbabwe Service, Dr. David Himbara, author, consultant, and analyst. He joined us via Skype from Toronto, Canada. And last but not least, Tabu Butagira, Associate Editor, The Daily Monitor, an independent Ugandan newspaper. He joined us via telephone link-up from the Ugandan capital, Kampala.